What if the most dangerous secrets in history aren't written in books, but hidden in names you were never meant to hear? Each name is a curse. The 5 demons. The Vatican tried to erase from history isn't just a title, it's an open challenge to everything you think you know about forbidden knowledge. For centuries, these names have been deliberately removed from archives, their sounds locked away like weapons too precise to be left in the hands of the public. And yet, fragments remain, scraps in forgotten grimoires, whispers in rituals, traces buried in architecture older than nations. The Vatican's own suppression records hint at something unsettling. These aren't just identifiers, they're operational codes. Names that summon demons, names too dangerous to speak, each one a spiritual curse that changes you the moment you encounter it. Not because they're evil in the way you've been taught, but because they rewire how you see reality. Some open paths that were never meant to be walked. Others close doors you didn't know existed. Here's the paradox. In erasing them, the Church may have only made them stronger. History shows that when knowledge is forbidden, it finds new ways to survive, encoded in songs, carved into stone, hidden in plain sight. And now, for the first time, we'll reconstruct their stories from surviving fragments, uncovering why these 5 forgotten demons, Veltarion, Abarthiel, Uragni, Sahal, and Nemarael, were considered too dangerous for the public record. Before we begin, understand this, knowing a name is not a neutral act. In this journey, you won't just be learning history, you'll be standing at the edge of a threshold, one that's been sealed for centuries. The only question is, will you step through? Some names are absent from history, not because they were forgotten, but because they were deliberately removed. In certain archives, one finds empty spaces where inscriptions once stood, gaps in records where lines of text were carefully erased. These omissions point toward the existence of forbidden demon names, designations once recorded with precision and later excised with equal intent. The process was systematic, not random, signs of a coordinated effort to remove references whose sound or form carried significance beyond ordinary speech. The cursed names of demons, preserved in only a handful of surviving fragments, appear to have been more than labels. They were structural components in a larger system of thought and ritual. The names that summon demons, according to early catalogues and private correspondences, functioned as keys to initiate contact or align with particular states of awareness. Within the hidden demonology of the Vatican, such terms were considered precise instruments, linguistic devices capable of producing consistent psychic effects. A name could serve as an address in a spiritual landscape, connecting the speaker to a specific locus of experience. Over time, erased occult knowledge of this type became accessible only in indirect form. Allegories, marginalia, or fragments incorporated into unrelated texts. These survivals suggest that the influence of the original material may not have disappeared entirely. Historical records mention names too dangerous to speak, not because of superstition, but due to the belief that sound itself could create an interaction between human consciousness and non-visible systems. Such terms, sometimes called the esoteric names of power, were mapped and studied before the campaigns of Vatican demon suppression. Manuscripts were altered, entire passages rewritten, and dangerous demon names in ancient texts were replaced with neutral terms or symbolic codes. The result was a historical record in which certain sequences appear to have been intentionally destabilized, leaving behind an incomplete but still traceable pattern. Surviving notes on the 5 forgotten demons describe their removal from public record as an act of containment. Each name is a spiritual curse in the sense that it functions as a catalyst. Once expressed, it could shift perception or alter the flow of internal states. In this context, Curse refers not to harm, but to irreversible transformation. Why these demons were erased is still a subject of speculation, but recurring descriptions highlight their connection to knowledge systems that diverged from approved doctrine, particularly in areas concerning the structure of time, the malleability of form, and the persistence of memory. One preserved grimoire from a restricted collection refers to names of demons removed from history as coordinates or reference points for navigating unseen realms. The unholy names the Church tried to hide are described as markers, each tied to a specific concept or domain within an older cosmology. The text does not depict these names as inherently benevolent or malevolent. It simply notes their capacity to function as tools. Annotations in multiple languages repeat a single phrase: to name is to locate, and to locate is to connect. This aphorism may have served as both instruction and caution. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons, as reconstructed from cross-referencing various sources, were often minimal in physical form. A single gesture, a particular sequence of syllables, or a specific arrangement of objects could constitute the entirety of the act. These were paired with cursed demon sigils, lost in time, which appear in sketches but rarely in full form. The decision to suppress such material was not necessarily to condemn it, but to prevent its uncontrolled use. As a result, traces persist mostly in adapted folk customs, where their original context has been obscured. Erasure, however, does not equate to disappearance. When secret names in black grimoires are removed from circulation, they often survive indirectly, embedded in coded language, misfiled in unrelated archives, or preserved in oral traditions that outlast official records. Over generations, the information changes form, but the core reference remains. In this way, suppressed names become both more difficult to access and, paradoxically, more intriguing to seek. The Vatican's records, public and private, indicate that the phenomenon of concealed names has always been a matter of ongoing attention rather than final closure. To ban a name is to remove more than a word. It is to dismantle a point of access. Throughout history, especially during large doctrinal reorganizations such as the Council of Nicaea and the Council of Trent, archives show patterns of deliberate omissions in linguistic records. Some of these correspond to entries linked with forbidden demon names, indicating a structured removal rather than incidental loss. The process was carried out not only in theological manuscripts, but in lexicons, liturgical scripts, and annotated glossaries. The aim appears to have been the containment of concepts that extended beyond approved cosmology, particularly those involving the mechanics of invocation and alignment. In the hidden demonology of the Vatican, language is understood as more than symbolic, it is operational. Each term functions like a coordinate, aligning the user with a specific framework of meaning and influence. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts, once publicly accessible, were viewed as gateways in this sense. A single utterance could act as an entry signal into a controlled system of interaction. Removing these from the record reduced the likelihood of uncontrolled engagements, whether intentional or accidental. Erased occult knowledge of this type was often substituted with allegorical language or replaced with names deemed inert. The Vatican demon suppression campaigns did not rely solely on destruction. Instead, they often involved repurposing. Manuscripts containing names too dangerous to speak were redacted in a way that preserved their external structure while replacing key sequences. The esoteric names of power were replaced with invented syllables or adapted biblical references, maintaining the flow of the text while neutralizing its operational content. This created a dual-layered record, one that read as consistent to the casual reader, yet withheld functional access from those without prior knowledge. Historical notes on the 5 forgotten demons suggest that their suppression was not due to categorical condemnation, but to the perceived instability their associated practices could cause. Each name is a spiritual curse in the technical sense. It acts as a trigger for a shift in consciousness or energetic state. Why these demons were erased is explained in some commentaries as a precaution against uncontrolled use, particularly in an era when theological authority sought to centralize and standardize spiritual practices. Their removal served as a linguistic quarantine. In rare surviving private compilations, names of demons removed from history are listed alongside ritual instructions and corresponding sigils. These unholy names the Church tried to hide are not presented as inherently harmful. Instead, their categorization reflects their potential to produce significant and unpredictable effects. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts often correspond with diagrams or coded markings, an indication that their value was tied to a complete system rather than isolated vocabulary. These systems, once dismantled, became much harder to reconstruct. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons, as reconstructed from scattered sources, display notable consistency in their simplicity. A candle positioned at a precise angle, a sequence of knocks on a wooden surface, or the timing of a recitation according to lunar cycles, these were paired with cursed demon sigils lost in time. Such acts were seen as mechanisms, not moral acts, tools that could operate in multiple ways depending on the intent and preparation of the user. The choice to suppress them was more about managing access than defining morality. Even with extensive redaction, suppression does not eliminate all traces. Secret names in black grimoires, though often fragmented or obscured, still appear in marginal annotations, coded poetry, or embedded in the rhythmic structure of hymns. Over centuries, these fragments form a shadow vocabulary, one that is incomplete but still charged with potential meaning. The Vatican's archival record suggests that this war on language is not a closed chapter, but an ongoing process. Names surface periodically, and each re-emergence prompts a fresh cycle of containment. Not all recorded entities were removed from history for their hostility or destructive tendencies. Some were erased because of the nature of the knowledge they carried. Surviving fragments from early demonological inventories indicate that the 5 forgotten demons were associated with advanced conceptual frameworks, ideas about the soul, the structure of time, the adaptability of form, and the preservation or erasure of memory. Within the hidden demonology of the Vatican, these were considered high-value domains of influence. By suppressing their identifiers, the Church could effectively prevent access to entire branches of practice and study. The result was less about condemnation and more about limiting certain forms of exploration. The forbidden demon names tied to these entities are absent from public liturgical sources, yet traces appear in comparative glossaries of regional folk practices. In each case, the cursed names of demons were accompanied by procedural notes, how to invoke, how to disengage, and the conditions under which each might appear. Removing these from the official record created a significant gap, one that even scholars within the institution acknowledged in private correspondence. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts often held an operational role within ritual cycles. Their absence was a deliberate dismantling of these cycles. Each name is a spiritual curse, but in the technical sense of an activator, a sequence of sounds that initiates a specific outcome once spoken or written. In this context, curse denotes effect, not morality. Why these demons were erased is explained in restricted commentaries as a matter of containment. Their associated knowledge was seen as non-aligned with the prevailing theological structure, making its use unpredictable within centralized doctrine. Erased occult knowledge of this sort is rarely destroyed outright. It is compartmentalized, transferred into coded storage, or preserved in forms that cannot be directly utilized. Historical marginalia suggest that the unholy names the Church tried to hide were often embedded within diagrams, astrological charts, or encrypted hymns. The secret names in black grimoires appear in conjunction with symbolic instructions, patterns of movement, specific materials, and visual markers that, taken together, formed complete operational systems. Suppressing the names alone disrupted these systems, rendering them incomplete without the accompanying identifiers. This separation of name and method is one of the most consistent strategies in Vatican demon suppression. The dangerous demon names in ancient texts tied to the 5 forgotten demons also reveal a shared thematic element: transformation. Some address the alteration of human perception, others the reconfiguration of personal or collective timelines. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons, described in surviving notes, were compact and efficient, often requiring no more than a single act performed at the correct moment. These were paired with cursed demon sigils lost in time, each functioning as a physical anchor for the name's effect. Once the sigil was gone, the activation process was incomplete. Why these demons were erased becomes clearer when examining the nature of their attributed domains. The first was linked to altering one's destined path, the second to shifting collective resonance through sound, the third to manipulating the perception of time, the fourth to altering physical and psychic form, the fifth to managing the continuity of memory across lifetimes. Each represents an area where control over self and environment could be significantly expanded. From an institutional perspective, limiting access to such capacities was a means of preserving structural stability. Despite suppression, fragments survive in secondary traditions, folk songs, regional rituals, and symbolic art forms. Over time, these fragments accumulate into a partial picture, one that hints at the original scope without restoring it entirely. The Vatican's records, when compared across centuries, suggest that while the doctrine of erasure reduced direct engagement, it did not eliminate the material entirely. Instead, it transformed it into a scattered puzzle, one that only becomes visible to those actively searching for connections others no longer recognize. Among the 5 forgotten demons, Voltarion is consistently associated with the concept of altering potential outcomes. Surviving references describe him not as a figure of chaos, but as an architect of variance, one who mapped the branching paths of events and revealed how to navigate them. In the context of forbidden demon names, his stands out for its link to decision points, those moments where subtle choices create wide divergences in personal and collective futures. The cursed names of demons like Voltarion were removed from official records during early phases of Vatican demon suppression, with annotations suggesting that his knowledge of fate manipulation conflicted with prevailing doctrines on predestination. In the hidden demonology of the Vatican, Voltarion's name appears alongside diagrams resembling open spirals, shapes without closure, implying paths that do not return to a single fixed point. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts often served as both identifiers and operational commands. In his case, uttering the name was said to initiate an inner reorientation, allowing the practitioner to perceive alternatives normally unseen. Erased occult knowledge surrounding this practice indicates that it was considered a direct challenge to any system built on fixed destiny. The esoteric names of power connected to him appear in multiple linguistic forms, suggesting that his domain was too widely known to be confined to one tradition. Each name is a spiritual curse in the sense that once spoken, it cannot be unlearned. In Voltaire's case, the curse was the permanent awareness of possibility, the inability to return to a singular, unquestioned path. Why these demons were erased, in part, connects here. Removing the name removed the map. Without it, the techniques for perceiving and influencing the weave of events were far harder to transmit. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons, when Voltaire's is examined specifically, involved minimal material tools but precise mental focus, often synchronized with transitional times, such as dawn or the exact midpoint between 2 seasons. Manuscripts that mention Voltaire's cursed demon sigils lost in time describe them as incomplete arcs intersecting at unexpected angles. These forms, paired with the name, were said to function like keys, unlocking a pattern of probability shifts. The unholy names the Church tried to hide in his case often appear embedded within poetic forms or layered within parables, ensuring the information was present without being overtly accessible. The dangerous demon names in ancient texts connected to him often included coded instructions for interpreting signs and omens, enabling informed alterations in course. Voltaire's presence in secret names in black grimoires tends to be less about direct invocation and more about alignment, placing oneself in a state where potential pathways become clearer. Surviving field notes from private collections describe methods involving pattern recognition in natural environments. The way leaves fall, the direction of bird flight, the sequence of unexpected sounds. These observations were matched against internal impressions to select the most favorable path. Without the name as an anchoring point, such systems lacked cohesion. The esoteric function of Voltaire's name also extended into collective structures. Some accounts suggest that communities aware of his methods could redirect the outcome of disputes, resource shortages, or political tensions by influencing key decision-makers at critical junctures. This subtle form of influence, grounded in timing and perception rather than force, may have been another reason why his name was among those erased. Removing access to such tools centralized the flow of choice-making authority. Though the spiral symbol and fragments of his methods remain in scattered form, the complete operational system tied to Voltaire is absent from public archives. What persists are hints, a recurring motif in folk art, a phrase embedded in lullabies, or the unexplained resonance of an open spiral carved into stone. These fragments suggest that while his name was removed from official memory, the underlying concept of possibility remains embedded in human culture, awaiting those able to recognize and reconstruct its original form. Ebarthiel is recorded in scattered sources as a former figure of harmony, later associated with controlled dissonance as a tool for altering collective states of consciousness. His place among the forbidden demon names appears consistently in inventories of entities linked to sound, resonance, and rhythm as mechanisms of influence. The cursed names of demons tied to acoustic phenomena were of particular interest to those compiling the hidden demonology of the Vatican, since sound could bypass intellectual resistance and act directly on emotional or spiritual perception. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts that referred to him were often paired with notations resembling musical intervals, markings later removed or replaced in the process of Vatican demon suppression. The accounts that survive describe his influence as the capacity to disrupt established patterns of agreement within groups. By introducing controlled dissonance, Ebarthiel's methods could dissolve fixed emotional states or group alignments, allowing for individual perception to emerge apart from the dominant resonance. Each name is a spiritual curse, in the sense that once an altered frequency is internalized, the listener cannot fully return to the prior state. Why these demons were erased, in his case, may relate to the destabilizing effect such practices could have on communal rituals dependent on uniform participation. Erased occult knowledge connected to Abathiel often appears in the form of rhythmic patterns preserved in folk traditions, sequences of beats or tones that do not resolve in conventional ways. These, when paired with the esoteric names of power, were described as capable of inducing altered states without the need for additional ritual components. The unholy names the Church tried to hide in relation to him were sometimes embedded into the phonetics of chants, hidden so that the surface meaning conveyed one message while the sound conveyed another. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons, with Abathiel's as a case study, demonstrate a tendency toward minimal physical action but precise auditory structure. Accounts note the use of echoing spaces, repeated refrains, and sudden silences as part of the process. The cursed demon sigils, lost in time, connected to him were often drawn with curved lines that resembled flowing staves of music, but fragmented, as if intentionally incomplete. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts frequently link these sigils with timing instructions, aligning sound with celestial or atmospheric conditions. Secret names in black grimoires referencing Abathiel are sometimes found alongside diagrams of sound waves, unusual for the periods in which they were drawn. These entries focus on the idea that resonance can be directed, layered, and withheld for specific outcomes. Unlike other names associated with summoning, his appears to be more about modulation, shaping an existing environment rather than introducing an external presence. Such precision in control over shared perception may have been a factor in the decision to restrict access to his name. Some traditions, particularly in isolated communities, retain fragments of what may be his influence. Children's games with nonsensical rhymes, ceremonial songs with wrong notes inserted at regular intervals, and work chants that suddenly change tempo. While these no longer carry the full operational context, they demonstrate the persistence of pattern even after official suppression. Why these demons were erased may, in his case, come down to the difficulty of defending against an influence that can be introduced so subtly. Abathiel's legacy, insofar as it can be reconstructed, suggests that sound can be both a unifying and a liberating force, depending on its arrangement. Without his name as the key to integrate these techniques into a coherent system, what remains is scattered fragments of rhythm, incomplete notations, and oral traditions that hint at an origin beyond their current form. Yet the recurrence of these patterns across cultures implies that while the official record is silent, the underlying principle has not been entirely forgotten. Uragnai appears in the surviving record as an entity associated with temporal perception, specifically the idea that time is not fixed but can be navigated in multiple directions. Within the catalogue of forbidden demon names, his stands out for its consistent pairing with diagrams of cycles, spirals, and interlocking rings. The cursed names of demons tied to temporal concepts were treated with particular caution in the hidden demonology of the Vatican, since altering one's perception of time could also alter the perceived inevitability of doctrinal narratives. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts that referenced Uragnai were often removed entirely, replaced with abstract symbols or neutral theological terms during Vatican demon suppression. The accounts that remain describe Uragnai's domain as revealing the existence of concurrent or parallel sequences of events, not limited to linear progression. Each name is a spiritual curse in the sense that once a person perceives time as flexible, their relationship to cause and effect changes permanently. Why these demons were erased, in this case, likely relates to the institutional preference for a singular, unified timeline that reinforces established histories and destinies. Erased occult knowledge about Uragni frequently appears in astrological manuscripts, hidden in the annotations that discuss planetary conjunctions and their effect on subjective experience. Esoteric names of power tied to Uragni often involve syllables that, when spoken, mirror the rhythm of breath cycles or heartbeats, creating an entrainment effect. The unholy names the Church tried to hide in this case may have served as mnemonic anchors, enabling practitioners to return to specific moments in memory or projection. The forbidden rituals of the five demons, when applied to Uragni, included focused observation of repetitive natural patterns, waves, pendulum swings, seasonal shifts, while silently holding the name in thought. This process was recorded as a method to step beside the ordinary sequence of events. The cursed demon sigils lost in time linked to Uragni often depict intersecting arcs with points marked at irregular intervals. These markings correspond to documented rituals in which practitioners would align their actions to moments calculated outside standard calendars. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts that dealt with temporal shifts were usually annotated with warnings about non-return, an acknowledgement that certain changes in perception could not be reversed. These annotations were among the first elements removed in suppression campaigns. Secret names in black grimoires containing Uragni's identifiers are rare but notable for their precise use of number sequences. These sequences, when paired with environmental cues, were said to facilitate entry into altered temporal states. Surviving field notes describe experiments in which such sequences were applied to decision-making, resulting in outcomes that deviated sharply from the probable. Whether these effects were external changes or shifts in the practitioner's perception remains an open question in the historical record. Some folk traditions may still carry traces of Uragni's influence, often disguised as seasonal or agricultural customs that occur out of sync with regional norms. These deviations, planting at unconventional times, marking festivals on unaligned dates, mirror the broader concept of stepping outside established cycles. While stripped of their original names and sigils, such practices suggest an enduring, if partial, survival of the underlying ideas. Uragni's presence in the historical fragments highlights the possibility that time was viewed by some traditions as a navigable medium rather than a rigid framework. The neutral stance of surviving commentaries treats this as a functional capability rather than an inherently positive or negative force. Without the complete name and its associated operational context, the practice remains incomplete, yet its traces continue to appear wherever human experience challenges the inevitability of a single, unalterable timeline. Sahal is consistently linked in surviving records to the concept of transformation, both physical and psychological. Within the collection of forbidden demon names, his stands out for the frequency with which it appears alongside imagery of serpents shedding their skin, mirrors of polished metal, and diagrams showing gradual alterations of form. The cursed names of demons tied to transformation were considered strategically significant in the hidden demonology of the Vatican, as they implied that identity could be modified at will, independent of external authority. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts that referenced Sahal were typically removed in their entirety during Vatican demon suppression, often replaced with allegorical parables about moral constancy. In archival notes, Sahal's influence is described as a process by which the practitioner could adjust appearance, posture, and even perceived presence to fit a desired outcome. Each name is a spiritual curse in the sense that, once the knowledge is internalized, the practitioner cannot fully return to a fixed self-concept. Why these demons were erased, in this instance, likely relates to the destabilizing effect that fluid identity could have on religious systems rooted in fixed categories of sin, virtue, and salvation. Erased occult knowledge in this domain often appears in the margins of alchemical treatises, framed as metaphor for the refinement of metals or the transformation of base matter into higher states. The esoteric names of power tied to Sahal were sometimes hidden within descriptions of ceremonial garments or detailed body postures. The unholy names the Church tried to hide here may have functioned as activation points for altered states of embodiment. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons applied to Sahal involved controlled breathing, focused visualization, and specific movements, techniques that parallel practices found in multiple cultural traditions. Such rituals were said to temporarily dissolve the practitioner's fixed identity, enabling them to adopt new qualities. Cursed demon sigils lost in time linked to Sahal often depict an open frame or outline, suggesting a form ready to be filled with something else. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts connected to these sigils sometimes appear with annotations describing shifts in temperature or sensation during ritual, indicating that the transformation process was experienced physically. These sigils were among the first to be deliberately fragmented in suppression efforts, making their full reconstruction difficult. Secret names in black grimoires mentioning Sahal often accompanied diagrams of mirrored surfaces or liquid pools, symbols long associated with reflection and mutable form. Surviving descriptions suggest that invoking the name while focusing on such a surface created a link between the practitioner's perception and the mutable qualities they sought to embody. The process appears to have been more about resonance and alignment than summoning an external force. Folk practices may still preserve fragments of Sahal's influence, particularly in initiation ceremonies, masquerades, and seasonal rites involving masks or body painting. These cultural remnants serve as symbolic expressions of transformation, even if the original operational context has been lost. The recurrence of these patterns across widely separated regions suggests that the concept of intentional self-alteration persisted despite the erasure of the name. Sahal's role in historical records presents transformation as a neutral capability, one that could be applied for concealment, adaptation, or self-redefinition. Without the complete name and accompanying sigils, the practice remains partial, yet the persistent appearance of its motifs in art, ritual, and folklore suggests that the underlying principle of mutable identity is deeply embedded in human culture, surviving long after the official record was altered. Nemariel is noted in surviving sources for his association with the manipulation of memory, both the retrieval and the deliberate erasure of recollections from other lifetimes. In the inventory of forbidden demon names, his appears alongside diagrams resembling interwoven knots, broken chains, and keys partially hidden within geometric patterns. The cursed names of demons tied to memory were regarded in the hidden demonology of the Vatican as tools with significant potential to alter an individual's spiritual continuity. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts that referenced Nemariel were often removed or replaced with general warnings about forgetting the past, stripping them of operational specificity during Vatican demon suppression. The records portray Nemariel's function as enabling a practitioner to untie the link between past incarnations and the present life, or to restore connections that had been obscured. Each name is a spiritual curse in the technical sense. Once invoked, the resulting shift in awareness could not easily be undone. Why these demons were erased, in his case, may relate to the possibility of bypassing doctrinal models of karma, sin, and redemption. Erased occult knowledge connected to him often surfaces in esoteric commentaries on dream work, where memory is treated as a movable boundary rather than a fixed archive. Esoteric names of power linked to Nemariel sometimes appear embedded in instructions for constructing labyrinths or symbolic passageways. The unholy names the Church tried to hide in this context may have been used as verbal triggers to open or close access to specific memory streams. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons, applied to Nemariel, reportedly involved controlled sensory deprivation, extended periods of silence, or guided visualizations designed to walk through one's own internal archives. The cursed demon sigils lost in time associated with Nemariel often feature concentric circles interrupted by narrow breaks, representing points where continuity can be intentionally severed. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts connected to these sigils occasionally appear in marginal notes describing the sensation of waking from another life, suggesting that the intended effect was experiential rather than purely symbolic. These sigils were among those most thoroughly excised from manuscripts, sometimes leaving only the faint outline of their original form. Secret names in black grimoires mentioning Nemariel are sometimes accompanied by lists of specific herbs, resins, and minerals historically associated with enhancing dream recall or inducing altered states. This pairing suggests that his methods may have combined linguistic activation with sensory cues to anchor or dissolve memory traces. Without the complete name, these combinations are less predictable in outcome. Some regional customs still preserve faint echoes of Nemariel's domain, often in the form of rites marking transitions between life stages, birth, adulthood, marriage, and death, where symbolic forgetting or remembering is enacted. These fragments, though no longer tied to their original framework, may retain elements of the older operational model. Nemariel's place in the surviving record presents memory as a modifiable construct, subject to both preservation and intentional removal. In the absence of his full name and sigils, the practice remains incomplete. Yet the persistence of related symbols and customs suggests that the principle of selective remembrance continues to resonate in human culture, long after the deliberate removal of its most direct tools. In the surviving historical material, suppression does not signify absence. The forbidden demon names linked to the 5 forgotten demons persist in indirect forms, fragments in songs, symbols embedded in architecture, or phrases preserved in oral tradition. The cursed names of demons, once removed from official records, often reappear unintentionally in unrelated contexts. In the hidden demonology of the Vatican, this phenomenon is acknowledged as resonance drift, where a suppressed sequence re-emerges in altered form but retains enough structure to remain identifiable to those who recognize it. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts may no longer be printed in full, yet their echoes persist in marginalia, cryptic footnotes, and interpolated annotations. Each name is a spiritual curse, in that its re-emergence can shift perception or trigger an internal state change, even when encountered by accident. Why these demons were erased becomes a recurring question in private commentaries, some noting that removal reduced the likelihood of uncontrolled use, others suggesting that erasure only intensified the allure. Erased occult knowledge often returns through dreams, described in field notes as visions containing unfamiliar syllables or sigils that later match suppressed records. The unholy names the Church tried to hide are sometimes experienced subjectively before they are encountered in any physical text. The esoteric names of power connected to these entities have a documented tendency to manifest as recurring thoughts, phrases, or images. In some accounts, a person who dreams one of these names may begin noticing patterns or symbols in waking life that correlate with it. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons are rarely performed today in complete form, yet certain elements, Gestures, arrangements of objects, or sequences of sounds can still trigger partial effects. Cursed demon sigils lost in time have been observed in folk art, graffiti, or decorative motifs with no apparent awareness of their original function. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts were often described as having after-images in the mind. Once read or heard, they linger, resurfacing unpredictably. Secret names in black grimoires are known to produce similar phenomena, with practitioners reporting that suppression seems to deepen their persistence rather than diminish it. This aligns with observations in Vatican demon suppression records that removal may interrupt transmission but does not eliminate the imprint left on those who once engaged with the material. Some cultural traditions treat these resurgences neutrally, regarding them as symbolic markers of heritage or identity. Others interpret them as warnings, a sign that certain knowledge remains active beneath the surface of collective awareness. In either case, the persistence of the names suggests that erasure may function more as concealment than as destruction. The concept of names too dangerous to speak has thus evolved into one of names too embedded to fully forget. Why these demons were erased yet still echo may be partly explained by the adaptability of the human mind in preserving what it deems significant. Even without operational instructions, the names themselves can act as mnemonic seeds, regenerating fragments of their original context when conditions allow. The unholy names the Church tried to hide may therefore survive, not through preservation of documents, but through the self-repairing nature of cultural memory. The result is a landscape in which suppressed content remains present yet obscured, waiting for recognition. In this way, the curse of remembering is not about misfortune, but inevitability. Once a name has entered the shared human archive, it continues to circulate, sometimes openly, sometimes hidden, but never entirely gone. The Vatican's records, read in sequence over centuries, suggest that this cycle of suppression and re-emergence is expected, and perhaps from a purely archival standpoint, unavoidable. The surviving records frame each of the forbidden demon names not as mere labels, but as thresholds. In the language of the hidden demonology of the Vatican, a name is described as a hinge, a point where two states of reality connect. The cursed names of demons tied to the 5 forgotten demons fit this model precisely. Each name is a spiritual curse in that it initiates change upon contact, whether or not that change is desired. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts often appear alongside structural diagrams, as if the word itself were a key and the diagram the door it was meant to open. Once the operational pairing is understood, erasure becomes a means of removing the key from public reach. Why these demons were erased is explained in certain internal commentaries as the removal of uncontrolled gateways. The unholy names the Church tried to hide each pointed toward a distinct form of agency, altering fate, disrupting collective resonance, bending time, transforming form, or managing memory. Forbidden rituals of the 5 demons were structured so that speaking the name was inseparable from activating its associated process. Cursed demon sigils lost in time acted as stabilizers, ensuring the process unfolded in a controlled sequence. Without the name, the sigil was incomplete. Without the sigil, the name was unstable. The esoteric names of power functioned as both identifiers and operational triggers, a dual role that made them resistant to partial preservation. Dangerous demon names in ancient texts could not easily be documented in a purely symbolic form without losing their primary function. For this reason, secret names in black grimoires were often encoded within acrostics, layered poetry, or composite glyphs. These methods allowed for preservation without open accessibility. In some traditions, Contact with such a name was framed as a form of initiation, an unrepeatable moment after which one's perception could not fully revert to its prior state. The Vatican Demon Suppression Archives note that this initiation could occur unintentionally, simply by encountering the name in an unprotected context. Erased occult knowledge of this type was therefore considered volatile, not for its inherent nature, but for its unpredictability once in circulation. Cultural remnants show that the concept of initiation through a name has persisted in adapted forms, ceremonial oaths, coded challenges in mystery schools, or symbolic naming moments in rites of passage. Though stripped of their original connection to the 5 forgotten demons, these echoes retain the structure of crossing a threshold. The forbidden rituals of the 5 demons appear, in some folk adaptations, as tests of perception, tasks that subtly alter how reality is interpreted. The unholy names the Church tried to hide, when reconstructed in scholarly settings, have occasionally been approached not as invocations, but as linguistic artifacts, tools for understanding the evolution of esoteric systems. Even so, the potential for operational use remains embedded in their structure. This is why certain research circles handle them under controlled conditions, ensuring that study does not inadvertently become practice. Ultimately, the question that surfaces in both historical and contemporary contexts is not whether these names exist, but what one intends to do upon learning them. The archival record is clear. Every name is a door, and every door demands a cost to pass through. That cost is not necessarily destructive, but it is irreversible. The initiation, once begun, cannot be undone, and those who cross, willingly or by accident, must continue forward without the certainty of where the path leads. You've now walked through the fragments of a history that was never meant to reach you. Each name is a curse, the 5 demons. The Vatican tried to erase from history is not just a catalogue of forgotten words. It's a reminder that knowledge, once known, cannot be fully destroyed. The forbidden demon names, the cursed names of demons, the dangerous demon names in ancient texts, they persist because human memory is not so easily edited. But here's the real challenge. What will you do with this? Will these names remain just curiosities, or will they change how you see control, suppression, and the thin line between belief and truth? Each name is a spiritual curse, not because of superstition, but because once it's inside you, you can't unknow it. Do you think erasing knowledge makes the world safer or more dangerous? If suppression only makes a thing more persistent, what else might still be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone who's willing to look? If you want to keep uncovering the suppressed, the erased, and the hidden threads of history, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story we reveal may not just answer your questions, it might change the way you see everything.